إن شاء الله.
بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وبعد. أحمد الله حمد الذاكرين الشاكرين على نعمه وأصلي وأسلم على من لا نبي ولا رسول بعده سيدنا محمد عليه وعلى آله أفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم وبعد. My dear brothers and sisters tuning in live on the Lighthouse Zoom channel or watching the recording in a rebroadcast, inshallah ta'ala, I welcome you to the third halaqa about zakah, inshallah ta'ala, this magnificent pillar of Islam. And inshallah ta'ala, we will devote this halaqa to discussing the zakah of the 401k plan and the traditional IRA plan. But before we do this, we do a quick review so we remember the definitions and recall our understanding of the zakah fundamentals. So zakah is due on wealth that is liable to increase, such as cash or sellable goods. And items that are used for personal use are exempt from zakah, such as clothing, vehicles, regardless houses, regardless of their value, as long as they are for personal use. And we gave a few examples last time, and a simple example would be if a person has a library worth like the one behind me that has lots of books in it that he has for his personal use, versus a person who has a bookstore that sells books. Both of us have the same amount of books. For example, my intention is to reuse them for reading and enriching my understanding of something, for researching, or even I use them for work. But in that case, their value is not liable for zakah. Whereas a person who would have these books with the intention of selling them, they then become a commodity at that point, and then zakah has to be calculated on them. And we said that the zakah, you have to satisfy owning the nisab, or the threshold, which is 85 grams of gold. That's approximately $4,700 these days, and it fluctuates, so it's best to calculate it at the day that it's due. Lots of scholars have rounded it off to about $5,000, but to be more careful, you would probably want to track it with the value of gold. An important point that I wanted to make before we delve into the 401k plans and the IRA is that the decisions that one makes and the intention that one has have a pivotal determination on whether the zakah is owed or not. So again, if I am a person who likes collecting valuables, as long as I'm collecting that valuable because I want to acquire it for personal use, there's no zakah on it. But if I'm collecting it with the intention that this is an asset that is bound to increase in value as time goes by, then zakah is owed upon it, because intention to sell, be it now or later. As long as there is an intention to sell, it becomes a commodity. And we gave the example of the jewelry that women would acquire. As long as it's being acquired purely for personal use, then there is no zakah on it. And if it is acquired with the dual intention that I am acquiring it, it will always increase in value. At one point, I'm going to sell it, and at that point, it becomes liable for zakah. And we said in the very specific case of female jewelry, one of the most common opinions is to give zakah at least once in your lifetime because of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that we mentioned last time. Now, so in short, investments are like trading in goods. So when you buy shares in a company, that's a trade. You can trade market shares. And so keeping that in mind, we will start, inshallah, move to discussing 401k plans and IRAs. But one final point that I want to make before I go into that is the decision people make. Let's say I am a person who has a sum of cash. And let's say it's $20,000, and I'm interested in acquiring a car. I got two options. I can go buy the car and then use my entire $20,000, or lease the car and save some of that $20,000. Which one of these two decisions is a tax shelter, if you will, if you want to think of it that way? The person who spent the entire $20,000 is actually in a tax shelter because this vehicle has now become of personal use, And as long as they did not buy it with the intention of selling it at a higher value or trading in it, and it's only for personal use, then his money is now, or that value of car is not zakah liable. Whereas the person who decided to not use his entire amount, but only used a portion of it for lease, the amount that remained in his possession above the nisab, the threshold, if a year passes by, he owes zakah on it. So those are two examples of two people who ended up doing the exact same thing. They both got a car. They're both using the car, but one used all the money and put it and froze it in that car, and the other one kept some of the cash. Even though the guy who bought the car can still sell it later for a certain amount of money, once this happens, then it becomes a commodity, and at that point, the zakah is owed. So the reason I'm giving all these examples is I'm trying to put the people in the mindset of what we are talking about when we discuss IRAs or 401k plans. So the examples I just gave were to enumerate or shed the light on what is a commodity for selling or what is an investment as time goes by, its value increases when that intention is there, versus what is for personal use or for in my possession.
And I had this one picture I took with him, and as wow, it was an awesome picture. And he said, "That's my wife." I said, "Well, you do."
Asking a question, or are you?
We went to town, and it's all with the sheets, and I did the picture, and I was behind it, and it was a really awesome picture.
Sister Sarah, are you addressing the halaqa?
Okay, now I'm coming in. Oh, so Sarah's trying to come in.
Okay, inshallah, we will resume. I believe that Sister Sarah was in a conversation and did not intend to ask a question during the halaqa. So I apologize for that small interruption. So let's go back now and start taking a little deep dive in the 401k plans and traditional IRA. So just a little background history so that people understand what we're talking about. In 1978, the Congress passed a Revenue Act, which included a provision that allowed employees to avoid being taxed on a portion of their income that they decided to receive as deferred compensation. And rather than direct pay. So this is a portion of your salary that you don't get directly, but you actually put it aside and you don't receive it immediately. And the Internal Revenue Code for that one was 401k, which is why it's called the 401k plan. 94% of private employers today offer a 401k plan. So what is the 401k plan? It's basically a retirement plan where you take a portion of your salary and you put it there. Because you don't have access to it, you are not taxed on that amount. And in a lot of instances, the employer does some contribution, may match your contribution. Regardless of the situation, there is a setup between the individual and his employer. So the 401k plan allows you to put money in the stock market or in an investment market, and you are not taxed on any amount in that 401k plan as long as you have not withdrawn. Now, the withdrawal, there are restrictions on it. You cannot have access to that money except at retirement age. That's usually set by the plan. Otherwise, you pay penalties and you pay taxes on the whole amount according to your tax bracket if you try to withdraw early. A traditional IRA account or individual retirement account is very similar to the 401k plan, but in this instance, a person does it on his own. It is not accessed through the employer, and nobody else is contributing to it except the individual himself. Both of these don't give you direct access to the funds. The funds are locked in that investment. And as long as you leave them there, they are tax-free. Taxes are only owed on them when you start receiving money from them. So when you reach the retirement age, for example, and you start drawing money from your IRA or 401k, then whatever amount you're getting in will put you in a certain tax bracket and it's taxed as income. If you attempt to access this money early, you will be penalized, and different plans have different penalties. Sometimes the penalty could be as severe as 50%, as low as 10%. Now, so with that in mind, and with the examples that I gave about investments, and the fact that assets are considered like trading and goods. So the question now, should access restricted accounts like the 401k plan or the IRA plan be zakatable, for example, if you want to make that word up, would mean liable for zakat. So there's a lot of discussion about it, and there's a few opinions, and I'm going to go through them and then give you my own, the one I feel to follow. I am not a scholar that is capable of making fatwa. I am simply educating myself and the listeners to the research that I have done. So the first view is that the zakah is due on the entire market value of the account every year. This is the most stringent of the views. And this is the opinion of Dr. Muzammil Siddiqui and Sheikh Abdul Rahman Mangera. The reasoning is that the person voluntarily put this money into that account. He was not forced to be putting that money in that account. And that the investment in that 401k plan or that IRA plan grows at the full amount itself. No taxes are being deducted from it, and no penalties are being applied for it. So zakah, in their opinion, is due on the full amount. Any future taxes or possible penalties, should the person attempt to access them, are not given consideration when you're calculating zakah, simply because they did not happen. And most people actually go through their entire life without having to dive into their 401k plans early or their IRA plan early. And so in that opinion, you look at your 401k plan, you see how much its value is. They actually do give you and send you an annual assessment of how much money you have or averaged over the year, and then use that as to calculate your percentage zakah if it crosses the $5,000 limit, or if you want to be more articulate and careful, the 85 grams of gold, then you owe 2.5% of that amount in zakah. A second view says that the early withdrawal penalty and the individual current tax bracket should be deducted from the market value of that account before calculating how much zakah is on it. So they're not saying that zakah is not due on it. They're actually saying zakah is still due on it, but they're saying you should deduct whatever the penalty for early withdrawal is and whatever the taxes are, in their opinion, because this is the amount of cash that you have access to. You don't have access to the rest. And that's how they're making their opinion. There's a little issue with that idea is simply because a lot of people, like I said, will go through their entire life without having to access the account with early withdrawals and therefore will not pay taxes at the current tax bracket or have to pay penalties. Remember, if you have a job and you have a certain amount of income, you're at a certain level of tax bracket. Once you retire and you've hopefully paid off your house, your car, and so on, you don't need as much money, so you're drawing a lot less. So the tax bracket in the future is usually a lot less than the tax bracket of your current state. So because of that, that ruling did ignore this point here, but I'm just conveying the opinion. So there is another issue with this opinion because if you think about it, I can do two different investments, one in a 401k plan or an IRA plan, and one in a stock market. I could put the same amount of investments in both ways. And one I would owe zakah on, according to the general ruling of zakah, and according to this opinion, the other one, I would have a substantially reduced amount of zakah on it, despite the two growing at the same amount. So let's say I put $100,000 in an Apple stock, for example, and $100,000 in a 401k plan. And after a year, I'm going to go to look at the Apple stock and I say, oh, it has grown to this amount 2.5% of that is due, and I pay that. The other 100K that was in the 401K plan grew maybe even at a higher rate, but is completely shielded, or is at least tax zakah shielded by the amount of the withdrawal penalty and the income tax that I'm currently at, which makes for an inconsistency in that opinion. There is a third view that says zakah is not due on a retirement account, and they give 3 arguments for it. So no zakah at all. So first opinion, that you have to give zakah annually on the amount in your 401k or IRA plan that crosses the threshold and stays there for a full year. That's the first one. This is the opinion of Muzammil Siddiqui and, like I said, Sheikh Mangara. The second opinion is that you calculate the zakah that is owed after deducting the taxes and the early withdrawal penalty. And this is the opinion of Sheikh Salah Al-Sawi. The third opinion is that there is no zakah owed on it at all, and there's 3 reasons that were given for that. First is that the zakah is only due on wealth that is fully accessible by the owner, so retirement accounts are exempt. Now, the reason they're making this argument is that, let's say somebody gave you an inheritance that is locked somewhere that is in excess of the amount of the threshold for nisab, but you have no control over it. You have no access to it. Yet, if you owe zakah on it, you would be actually digging yourself out of wealth without having the benefit of that wealth. It's not growing. You are able to access it, and so on. So the scholar said in that case, there is no zakah owed. And these scholars here are making that parallel. They're saying this 401k retirement account or IRA, you have no access, full access to, so you don't owe zakah on it. And the issue with that idea is that the person, first of all, consciously placed their amount of money in that 401k plan. So nobody, this was not forced on anybody. This was a choice that I, for example, did, and I'm sure anybody who has a 401k plan was given that choice as part of their employment. Would you like to set up a 401k plan? So this is not an instance where you don't have control, or that was given, where you did not consciously make that choice, and the choice was made for you. This is a case where the condition or the choice was made by you. The second is that it is incorrect to say that a person with a retirement account does not have access to it. If something does happen to you, and you do, inshallah, may Allah forbid, but lose your job or something, and you have a 401k account, you can actually access it. And by the measures of zakat, you'll be wealthy. And so to say that you have no access to it, that is incorrect. Even though there are early withdrawal penalties in taxes, the true fact of the matter is that 401k plan is growing, and it is wealth that you can access under conditions. Number 2, the second reasoning they said for that zakah is not due on retirement account is that it is not managed, it's not fully accessible and not managed by the person. But the issue with that opinion is that while you may not be managing it, there is a money manager on the other side. If it's a mutual fund, for example, or something else, there is somebody actually actively managing that account. And an example would be given on the days of the Prophet ﷺ or otherwise. If you have a certain amount of funds and you have a merchant friend and you want to invest some money with him, so you give him maybe $10,000 or so, which is above the nisab, and he goes, okay, I'll use this money, I will use it in my shop or my store, and I'll give you some profit, but the condition is that you cannot ask me for the entire amount for about 5 years. In that scenario, you cannot claim that you don't have access to this money. And so likewise, you cannot claim that you don't have access to this money simply because this is money that is growing. The intent of it is to benefit you. And so as it's growing in the market, you owe zakah on it. The third and last point that was made is that zakah is only, cannot be on wealth that can only be accessed by a penalty. That's also an opinion that I found. So if you do, if your wealth can only be accessed via a penalty, you don't owe zakat. And the problem with that argument is that you can make a parallel argument that you immediately realize that it doesn't hold. So let's say I have a certain amount of money and I sign a contract with a company that has a very nice security vault underground with guards and everything. And every time I want to access my money, I have to pay a fee just for the access itself. Or a safety deposit box in a bank or something like that. There is restrictions, but the cash is in there. The cash is safe and I still can get to it. The fact that there is a penalty that I have to pay does not mean that I don't own that wealth. And so the three opinions, just to summarize them, the weakest opinion is the opinion that says you don't owe on it. And I cannot find more or less Islamic arguments for it. It's just opinions that I found scattered out there, and I mentioned it simply to be complete. I do not like that opinion that you don't owe zakah on it. I think that is an incorrect opinion, but again, I am not a scholar. I am not allowed to make my own opinion. The other two opinions I like, and you are free to take whichever opinion you want to follow. I personally am more inclined to the first one that says you should look at your 401k and your IRA account, calculate the zakah owed on its full market value at the time it is owed. Do not deduct your penalty or your taxes because they have not hit the account and because the account is actually growing at its full market value. When they're calculating its annual increase, they're not saying your 100 grand, we're gonna consider it to be 100 minus so much in taxes and so much in penalties, it's only 30. No, they're actually taking the full account and investing, the full amount, investing the full amount as it grows. So that's the opinion I'm more inclined to follow. The other opinion which you can take is the one that says that you can deduct the penalty that's associated with early withdrawal and the taxes that would be owed on it before you calculate how much you owe in zakah. In the end, zakah is a pillar of Islam, and upholding it and doing it the right way is between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, there's a couple of important points that we want to make so that people don't feel that, oh my God, we now owe so much money and so on and so forth. It's important to understand that when you look at your account, your 401k account, especially because there is matching contributions in some instances by your employer, you will only calculate it on the vested amount. What that means is the amount that you now have control or ownership over. So sometimes there is a time period that has to pass with you remaining with that employer for a certain period of time before that amount becomes vested to you. If you leave earlier than that, then it's not yours. That amount is not calculated in your 401k zakah calculation. The other thing that people need to realize is that when you're about to calculate your net worth in that year to calculate the zakah on it, you have to deduct from it the debt that you owe to others. So you don't look, oh, I have 10 grand or $100,000 on my 401k plan. So now I owe $25,000 in zakah. I don't have that. What do I do? Well, before you make that calculation, go look at the debt that you owe. If you haven't paid off your house yet, if you owe debt to other people, if you have any liabilities, all of that is deducted from your entire net worth before you calculate the zakah. You go through and calculate the zakah calculator that will take 2.5% of your wealth. The final thing is, what if somebody does not have liquid assets to pay zakah because they have nothing to sell? My money is in the 401k plan. I have no liquid money on my hand. Let's say I owe everything. I don't owe any liabilities to people, but I cannot liquidate right now. I don't have any cash. I cannot withdraw from my 401k, and I don't have any cash on hand to pay zakah. In that instances, a scholar said that you can defer, not cancel, defer paying zakah until you are able to, but it would behoove you to make and prepare for what is owed by you in zakah before you keep locking your money into your 401k. So that is that opinion about the 401k. I'll actually here for a second and take some questions about the 401 and the IRA. Does anybody have questions in regard to the discussion we just had?
No, not in regard to the 401k. So mine is still with the county, and it's just been sitting. So I don't have to pay anything on that because my understanding is that it's not really moving. It's not really matured yet.
So is it above the threshold for zakah?
No, not really.
Then in that case, we're done. So that's the first question you ask. Is it
Okay.
above my threshold of zakah? If it is not, then you don't pay attention to it. The second question, if it's yes, has it been a year when it sat above the threshold? If the answer is no, you're done. If the answer is yes, then we continue. The third question is, do you owe any debt to anybody? Right? Have you paid off your house? Have you paid off your car? Have you any outstanding loans? If the answer is yes, then we deduct that and then we calculate the zakah on the
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I have a question too about savings. So if you got a savings account and the money is just sitting there and there's no activity, it's just money going in, but it's not being spent. It's just sitting. You have to pay zakat on that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And then when you do the calculation, Brother Kashif, you add up all your wealth resources. So you add the 401k to your savings account, to any investments that you had bought. Let's say you bought a vintage car, for example, not saying you did, but let's say you bought a vintage car so that value would increase by time and you would sell it. So since it's with the intention you add that also. So you add all of your wealth, right? And then you calculate, and then you subtract from it any liabilities, and then you calculate that remaining.
Oh, okay.
You don't segregate them, so you don't either undercut the zakah or overdo the zakah. Neither. So
Okay.
you have higher wealth, so that you don't segregate your accounts. Like I will have 3 bank accounts. Each one has $4,000 in it. Do I say, oh, that one doesn't owe zakah, it's below the 5,000 limit, and that one is below the 5,000, and that one is below the 5,000? No zakah. Oh, that's evading zakah. What I should do is say, I have 3 accounts. Each one has $4,000. I add them all up together. That's $12,000. That's now definitely above my threshold for zakah. But before I calculate, I need to look at how much debt I owe. I owe this much in debt. I haven't paid my house. I haven't paid my car. I haven't paid this. I borrowed money from this guy. I borrowed money from this guy. I deduct the debt that I owe from the wealth that I have, and the balance is what I inspect against the threshold. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Islam is very lenient. A lot of people think that if you have money in your possession that crosses the threshold, you owe zakah automatically on it. There's actually an instance in that mentioned in the book of Fiqh Sunnah, which talks about the rich that is a zakah recipient, a guy who owns, let's say, a house that he's renting, or has income, or has cattle, or is a rancher that has cattle above the threshold of zakah. So he owes zakah, and it's been a year and everything, but that amount that he has is not enough for him to sustain his family. He actually becomes a recipient of zakah. He doesn't pay it, despite crossing the threshold. So the key determining factor here, the key determinator here is it has to be in excess of your need. And what that means is you add up your wealth, you subtract from it your liabilities, and then you calculate the zakah on the balance, assuming it crosses the threshold. So just owning an amount of money in excess of the zakah threshold doesn't immediately make you liable for zakah. You're only liable if the debt that you owe does not pull you below the threshold of zakah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Any other questions before we move to a different point? So inshallah ta'ala, now we move, I wanted to give this its special attention because a lot of people have been asking about it. I personally had a lot of questions about it. I should say one of the best resources that I found was the Islamic University of California. It has a fantastic paper describing all the opinions and everything. And I can send that link for people to read on their own free time if they'd like on the WhatsApp link, inshallah ta'ala. Fantastic research that was done by them. Lots of good examples, lots of very easy language to read. One of the best resources that I found on the 401k issue. Now, we move to the next to last topic of the zakah. Who can accept the zakah from us? And in the beginning, when we talked and differentiated between zakah and sadaqah, we said zakah can only go out to Muslims. That 2.5% that you own or owe in zakah, if it is merchandise, cash, and the amount that's calculated if it's cattle and or agricultural produce, regardless of which type of money you own and how you calculate it, now you have zakah in your hand and you want to give it out. Who does the zakah go out to? Now, if it is zakah and not sadaqah, which is not charity, if it is zakah, it can only go out to Muslims. If it is charity, then it can go out to non-Muslims. So we are only talking about zakah. And so in zakah, it goes out to Muslims. There are only 8 groups, or there are 8 groups that can receive zakah, assuming it is available. And they are listed in the verse in the Holy Book that says, إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها وفي الرقاب. I apologize. إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل فريضة من الله والله عليم حكيم. So the categories are al-fuqara, the poor, al-masakin, the destitute, and I'll explain the definitions as we, inshallah, as we take each one on its own. وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا, the people whose job is to actually collect the zakah, the zakah collectors. وَالْمُؤَلَّفَةِ قُلُوبُهُم, these are people who have not embraced Islam, are interested in Islam, and part of the way we bring them to Islam, make them love Islam and understand the social structure and net in Islam, is to give them from the money of zakat. So al-mu'allafati qulubuhum. Wa fi riqab. Wa fi riqab are the people who are enslaved or who are slaves who are trying to gain their freedom. And part of the process of gaining freedom in the old days was that they would buy themselves out. And so they would be able to be given from zakat if they are available. Wal-gharimin. This is somebody, al-gharimin is somebody who has debt that he cannot bear. Meaning, so I have debt, but I cannot receive zakah because I have a job, I have income, I'm doing just fine. Alhamdulillah, and I hope you all are. But somebody whose debt has gone to the point that he is now on the verge of bankruptcy or is in bankruptcy because of that debt, is unable to repay the debt, that is al-gharim, and that you can give him from zakah. وَالْغَارِمِينَ وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Fi sabilillah means the people who are in jihad in sabilillah, and so we can use part of zakah to equip them, to give them the rights that they need to actually access the battlefield, to give them food, to give them shelter, and so on and so forth.
I have a question about what you just said.
Sabil is somebody who is on travel, whose resources on that trip have dried up. So he was heading from point A to point B. He got midway and his money ran out, and now he is in desperate need. You can give him part of the zakah to get him to his destiny, to help him continue the journey.
I have a question, sorry.
Yes, ma'am. What's your question?
So you said that a person has to be, like, when you said if they have a job, then you cannot give them zakat, or they have to be...
No, I did not say that. That if they owe debt, and that debt is too much for them to bear, even if they have, then you can give them zakah. But let's say they have debt, but they have a good income and they're able to pay the monthly payments of that debt. So somebody who has a very decent job, makes a 6-figure income and bought a house and he has debt. That debt is not small, it's large. But can he receive zakah? The answer is no, because that debt is not beyond what he can bear. Does that make sense? It has nothing to do with whether he has a job or not. A lot of people who have jobs, these jobs do not provide enough for them to eat even. Just by having a job does not put you out of the realm of being able to receive zakah. Does that clarify?
Clear.
I confused you. So let's take them one by one and describe them. We'll probably be only able to cover the first two, but we'll do the best we can. So al-fuqara, who are the poor? The definition in Islam of al-faqir is a person, and this will surprise you, who does not have his basic necessities. What's a basic necessity? A lot of people think it is food and drink. In Islam, the definition of basic necessity is your food, your drink, your clothing, your home, your shelter. You don't have to own it, you can rent it, but you have to have a home, and then you have to have a ride. In the old days, it was called a dabba, a camel, a horse, something that you can ride. In the new days, it's called a car. So if you do not have these 5, if these are not within your possession, you are considered poor by the measures of Islam, and you can receive zakah. You don't have, it does not have to be, this is not an invitation for everybody to say, I can receive zakah. My point is, the car doesn't have to be super nice and fancy. It just has to get you from point A to point B. But the fuqaha have determined that a car is part of your basic needs. How do you go to your job otherwise? And they've decided that having shelter, whether you own it or renting, is part of your basic needs. Being able to clothe and feed yourself and provide drink for yourself and your family is part of basic needs. So anybody who does not have these 5 things within his possession, is not able to secure them for himself, is considered poor and can receive zakah. How much zakah can he receive? We'll cover that in a second. The next one is al-masakin. And the reason I group them is that al-masakin, or the destitute, is a part or a subgroup of the poor. They're in a worse state. And some scholars define them as people who cannot secure the food for that day. So they are in deeper level of poverty. And some other scholars said that there's a very clear hadith that defines al-masakin and attaches the condition of not asking people for money. متعفف لا يسألون الناس إلحافا تحسبهم أغنياء من التعفف. These are all verses in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes their state. These are people who are proud of themselves. They do not stick out their hand and ask for help, and a lot of time go unnoticed because they don't go ask people for help. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put them in this ayah to tell us that it is upon us to go find them. So it is not just the people who are telling you, al-fuqara, the poor, who are telling you, I am in need, help me. And there is no shame in that. Let me add that, because the zakah is a wajib. It is the right in the money of the rich. It is not something that you're giving out of your kind heart. This is a duty on you. And this is their money. In your money, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put their due in your wealth. So when they ask you for it and you know that they are deserving, this is their money that you are have been entrusted in managing by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, al-masakin are the people who don't do this. They don't tell you. So they will go hungry without displaying it or going out and telling people. They will not stick their hands out. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by putting it in this verse, made it upon us, the Muslims, to go out and find them and figure out what their need is. I would mention the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which he defines al-miskin. He says, لَيْسَ الْمِسْكِينُ الَّذِي تَرُدُّهُ التَّمْرَ أو التَّمْرَتان. The miskin is not the one who would be happy and content if you give him a date or two. He's alluding to the people who are standing on the street that are just asking for money constantly. And then if you give them anything, they're grateful for it. Again, I am not belittling them for their condition. I'm just explaining the difference. وَلَا اللُّقْمَ وَلَا اللُّقْمَتَانِ إِنَّمَا الْمُسْكِينَ الَّذِي يَتَعَفَّفُ. So the miskin is the one who does not ask and is hiding his need from the people. That's what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam defined them as. Now, like I said, the verse has mentioned them to ensure that they are sought out and found and given from zakah. Now, how much money does one give to al-fuqara wal-masakin? How much money do I give them? Let's say I have a lot of zakah money, inshallah ta'ala, in the lighthouse. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it truly a standard bearer for its name. The lighthouse that it shines light for all the Muslims financially and Islamically and everything. Let's say we have a lot of zakah money in the lighthouse. How much money do I give out? How much, is there a maximum that I can give somebody that I cannot cross when I'm giving somebody? The scholars actually said there is no maximum. And what is recommended, this might surprise you, is that when you give al-faqir or al-miskin, your intention in the giving is to put them out of poverty if possible. Meaning, you give them and give them and give them until their state from faqr changes to ghina. So if he doesn't have a car and we can buy a car, we buy them a car. If he doesn't have shelter and we can get them shelter, we get them a shelter. And so it's food, shelter, and help them change their state. You give them until their state changes. So when do I stop giving? When my amount has changed their condition from faqr or poverty to the condition of ghina or richness. And it is actually encouraged, because when you think about it logically, if this is the form in which we are giving, then this poor person now, who I've changed the state of and put him from the condition of being poor to the condition of being ghani, next year he's going to be contributing to my zakah instead of needing it. So instead of just giving a little bit here and a little bit and hoarding the zakah, as what happens in a lot of places, no, you give the zakah entirety out. Hopefully the zakah changes the state of a recipient, no longer becomes a recipient, and next year contributes to the zakah, and so on and so forth. Now, can we give zakah to somebody who is able to get his own income? So this is a topic that is usually difficult to discuss. If I am able to work, can I get zakah? The opinion of the scholars is, if you're able to work and you can secure a job that can put you in out of poverty, then you cannot get zakah. But if you're doing everything you can and you're not able, then you are a recipient of zakah. And they're basing that on the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in Hajjat al-Wada', and he was dividing the zakah and the sadaqah, and two people came up to him and they said, give us some, ya Rasulullah. He said this, he responded by saying, in shi'tuma a'taytukuma, if you want, I will give you. Wala hadh, but understand, la hadha fiha li ghani. Yani, anybody who is rich does not have a right to zakah, wala li qawiyyin muktasib, nor to somebody who is able, who can get his own income and sustenance. So, if you are able to go out to work, you should go out to work before deferring to asking for being paid in zakah. This goes to the question that we got from the sister a second ago. Just because you have a job does not mean you cannot receive zakah. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if you are able physically to work, and if that work is sufficing your needs, then you do not receive zakah. If you're not able to work, then of course we'll have to take care of you. If you are able to work, but you choose not to work and you want to receive zakah, this is what is forbidden. Does that make sense? Okay. So a couple of hadith that I just mentioned.
I have a question real quick.
Yes, yes sir.
Is that money paid out of the Baitul Mal?
Say again?
Is it paid out of the Baitul Mal?
Baitul Mal. Yes.
Yeah.
So Baitul Mal is the name that was given to the institution of zakah, basically. So people, the amilin alayha, would go out and collect the zakah from all over the Islamic empire, and would bring it to central establishment in several places that was called Baitul Mal. And Baitul Mal would pay out to the people. Now we don't have a centralized Baitul Mal, unfortunately, so it falls to the institutions, smaller institutions like the Masajid and other organizations. Yes.
Okay.
So that's how the zakah would go up.
Okay. Thank you.
But if Beit al-Mal isn't available, that doesn't alleviate us from the responsibility. It makes it even harder, because now I have to go out and find this faqir and this miskin. And so we should be thankful for the masajid that are willing to do this. So we're very grateful for the Lighthouse opening up the zakah door for people so that they can, not everybody knows who these people are. And so that is a fundamental thing. And it becomes a Beit Mal for the Muslims in that instance. Any other questions? So I will stop with one last example. This is a very famous example, and I mentioned it a second ago, but I'll reiterate it. Somebody who is an owner of a business, or has income, or has a job, and that income is putting him within the realm of zakah. Like I said, let's say a rancher who owns cattle. That's a very easy example. And his number of cows he owns is above 40, which is a threshold of zakah for cows. So he owes zakah. He should give zakah. But the amount he has, let's say to the number of kids that he has, or because life is just super expensive, or because he has a lot of debt on his farm, and makes him needy, or puts him in the realm of needing to accept zakah, because he is poor. He can't, despite having 40 cows, he is unable to produce enough milk or trade to actually suffice his family. Can he receive zakah despite him crossing the threshold? And the answer is absolutely yes. And that again goes to the question that the sister raised. Just because you have income, just because you have ownership, and that ownership or wealth is large, we look at your state holistically. And that's what the calculation I was alluding to at the beginning is. You do not calculate it because on just what you own, but also you need to deduct what you owe. So just because I have $5,000 in my savings account doesn't automatically mean I'm above the threshold of zakah and I owe 2.5% of it. No, I need to subtract from that the debt I owe to brother X and the debt I owe to sister Y, and any other debt that is outstanding. Only when the balance between the two, the difference between the two, is above the nisab of zakah and has a full year revolve around it, where it has not fallen, that balance has not become negative below, or has not fallen below the nisab of zakah, do I owe the 2.5%? And again, I want to reiterate that the 2.5% is owed on the entire amount, not just that portion that's above the nisab. No, the entire amount. So your 2.5% is from the entire $5,000 or more that you have. Any other questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Jazakallah khair. So I know zakah is a little complex, and it's a science, like I said. And depending on the situations, we should figure out the condition of the person. But there's that that's just the general lines, and every specific person would have his own situation to inspect. I will stop here, inshallah ta'ala, because we're coming dangerously close to Maghrib, and it is the night before last in Ramadan. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He accepts from all of us, that this Ramadan becomes a new start for all of us, and then we emerge from it with no sin, inshallah ta'ala. Allahumma ameen, Allahumma ameen, Allahumma ameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam. Alhamdulillah.